Most people think of sleep as a shutdown, as if the body simply powers off, like a phone placed on a table at the end of the day. But biologically, that idea couldn't be further from the truth. Sleep is not passive. It is the most active phase of your brain's internal life. While your muscles rest and your eyes close, your brain enters a period of intense work. It cleans, reorganizes, repairs, and upgrades itself. Night is not the end of your day. It is the beginning of your brain's restoration cycle. Inside your skull, an extraordinary process unfolds. The brain opens pathways that remain partially closed during waking hours. Cerebrospinal fluid moves more freely, washing through neural tissue, carrying away metabolic waste that accumulates during thinking, stress, decision-making, and emotional labor. This includes byproducts linked to cognitive decline and mental fatigue. In other words, every demanding thought you had today left residue behind, and night is when your brain finally gets the chance to take out the trash. At the same time, memories are being reorganized. Experiences that were scattered across the day are sorted, strengthened, or quietly discarded. Emotional impressions are softened. Skills are refined. Neural connections that were used frequently are reinforced, while those that no longer serve you are weakened. This is how learning becomes permanent. This is how clarity returns. This is how tomorrow becomes sharper than today. But here is the part most people never consider. Your brain does not perform this work in isolation. It responds to signals, chemical signals, hormonal signals, metabolic signals. And one of the most powerful signals it receives before this repair cycle begins is what you eat. Food is not just fuel, it is information. Every bite sends a message to your nervous system about the state of the world. Is it safe? Is it chaotic? Is energy scarce? Is danger near? Your brain evolved in an environment where nighttime meant vulnerability. Darkness once implied risk. So before the brain fully releases into deep repair, it looks for reassurance. It looks for internal stability. It looks for cues that say, you can stand down, you can heal. When your evening habits spike blood sugar, overstimulate the nervous system, or trigger stress hormones, the brain remains partially on guard. It never fully enters its deepest repair modes. You may sleep, but the quality of that sleep is fragmented. The brain keeps one eye open. Waste clearance becomes less efficient. Emotional processing remains incomplete. You wake up feeling as though you rested, yet something still feels unfinished. This is why two people can sleep the same number of hours and wake up with entirely different levels of clarity, focus, and emotional balance. One brain entered repair. The other stayed in survival. Night then becomes a threshold, a doorway between effort and renewal. And what you do in the hours before sleep determines whether that doorway opens fully or only partway. Modern life is uniquely disruptive to this rhythm. Artificial light extends day into night. Screens flood the visual system with stimulation. Stress follows us into bed. The brain, designed for cycles of activation and release, remains suspended in a gray zone, neither fully awake nor fully at rest. Over time, this erodes mental sharpness, not dramatically at first, subtly. You forget more. You react faster than you reflect. Focus becomes harder to sustain. Emotional resilience thins. Yet the solution is not complicated. It begins with understanding that night is sacred territory for the brain. It is not leftover time. It is not empty space. It is the most valuable cognitive real estate of the entire day. Your brain wants to repair itself. It is biologically wired to do so, but it needs permission. It needs the internal environment to say, now is the time. The ancient systems that regulate sleep evolved long before alarm clocks and notifications. They respond to cues, darkness, stillness, and metabolic calm. When these signals align, the brain transitions from outward engagement to inward restoration. It moves from performance to preservation. This is why small choices before bed carry disproportionate weight. They are not minor. They are symbolic at the cellular level. They tell your nervous system what kind of night it will be. A chaotic night teaches the brain to remain vigilant. A calm night teaches it to repair. And over time, the brain becomes what it repeatedly practices. If it practices vigilance, it becomes reactive. If it practices restoration, it becomes resilient. This reframes the entire idea of self-improvement. We often think growth happens through effort, through pushing, striving, optimizing, but much of human advancement happens in stillness. Muscles grow during rest, not during exertion. And the brain is no different. Intelligence is not only built while thinking, it is refined while sleeping. The tragedy is that many people never experience what fully restorative nights feel like. They assume fatigue is normal. They assume mental fog is part of adulthood. They adapt to dullness instead of questioning it. But the brain you have in the morning is not fixed. It is the result of what happened the night before. Night is your daily opportunity to reset the nervous system, to dissolve stress before it hardens into identity, to let yesterday's emotional weight lose its grip, to let your brain return to its natural state, clear, curious, balanced. This is not about perfection, it is about alignment. When your evening environment, both external and internal, supports restoration, the brain responds with extraordinary generosity. It does what it has always done for our species, it repairs itself. You do not need to force it. You only need to stop interfering. Every night offers a choice. You can treat it as an extension of chaos or as a sanctuary for renewal. The brain will follow the signal you give it. And the most powerful signal you can send is this: now is the time to heal. Once you understand that night is the brain's repair window, the next question becomes obvious. What kind of internal environment allows that repair to happen most effectively? The brain does not heal in chaos. It heals in calm. It heals in stability. It heals when the body's chemistry shifts from urgency to ease. And that shift is influenced, in a surprisingly powerful way, by what you eat in the evening. Not all foods speak the same language to the nervous system. Some are loud. They spike, jolt, excite. They tell the body to stay alert, to mobilize, to prepare for action. Others are quiet. They settle. They release tension. They say, nothing is required of you right now. For a brain preparing to enter its deepest repair cycle, that distinction matters. Slow, mineral-rich foods belong to this quiet R category. They digest gently. They do not flood the bloodstream with sugar. They do not demand a surge of insulin. Instead, they release energy gradually and deliver nutrients that the nervous system uses as building blocks for balance. Magnesium, potassium, and naturally occurring antioxidants are not just dietary buzzwords, they are biochemical tools that the brain relies on to regulate electrical activity, calm overfiring neurons, and reduce inflammatory noise. Magnesium, for example, plays a direct role in relaxing muscles and modulating neurotransmitters that govern stress and sleep. It helps quiet the excitatory signals that keep the mind racing. Potassium supports nerve conduction and cellular stability. Antioxidants reduce the oxidative stress that accumulates from thinking, worrying, and processing the world all day. Together, these elements create a kind of internal dusk. They tell the body that intensity is no longer required. This matters because your brain cannot repair itself while it is bracing for impact. Repair requires safety. It requires the absence of threat signals. It requires a nervous system that is no longer scanning, calculating, preparing. The evening meal, then, becomes less about satisfying hunger and more about shaping the mental climate of the night. Many people unknowingly do the opposite. They end the day with foods that spike blood sugar, overstimulate the gut, and activate stress pathways. The result is not always obvious. You may still fall asleep, but the architecture of that sleep is altered. Deep stages become shorter, micro-awakenings increase. The brain never fully descends into its most restorative rhythms. In contrast, foods that digest slowly and deliver calming minerals act like a bridge between day and night. They smooth the transition. They reduce the internal turbulence that keeps the brain half awake. Instead of jolting the system, they cushion it. There is a psychological dimension to this as well. When you choose something gentle in the evening, you are not just feeding the body. You are modeling a relationship with time. You are signaling that urgency has ended, that productivity is no longer the metric, that the day has earned its closure. Modern culture glorifies stimulation. We associate energy with value, quiet with laziness. But the brain does not evolve under constant intensity. It fractures, it loses nuance, it becomes reactive. What it needs, especially at night, is permission to slow. The right kind of evening nourishment provides that permission at a cellular level. It says you do not need to defend. You do not need to perform. You can restore. Over time, this changes more than sleep. It changes identity. A brain that repeatedly experiences safe descent into rest becomes more resilient during the day. It handles stress with more elasticity. It recovers faster from emotional strain. It thinks more clearly under pressure because it is no longer operating from chronic depletion. This is how small rituals become structural. A single evening choice may feel insignificant, but biology is cumulative. The nervous system is a learning system. It remembers patterns. When calm evenings become consistent, the brain stops expecting threat at night. It begins to release control more easily. Deep sleep arrives faster. Repair becomes more complete. There is something quietly revolutionary about this. We often try to fix mental fatigue with stimulation, more caffeine, more input, more strategies. But clarity is not created by adding, it is created by subtracting interference, by removing the noise that prevents the brain from doing what it already knows how to do. Slow, mineral-rich foods are not magic. They do not override a chaotic life. But they align with the biology of restoration. They cooperate with the brain's natural rhythms instead of competing with them. They create internal conditions in which healing is allowed. And in a world that rarely grants permission to stop, this becomes an act of agency. You are not waiting for circumstances to calm. You are creating calm from the inside out. You are telling your nervous system that the day has ended, regardless of what remains undone. That message carries weight. It reshapes how the brain experiences time. It teaches that rest is not a reward for exhaustion, but a requirement for clarity. The deeper truth is this: the brain is not broken. It is overworked. It does not need to be pushed harder. It needs space to restore itself. And every evening, you have the chance to give it that space. Because what you choose at night is not just food. It is a signal. And the signal you want to send is simple: you are safe now. You can heal. One of the most underestimated forces shaping your mental life is something you almost never feel directly: the rise and fall of your blood sugar. It happens quietly, beneath awareness, yet it exerts enormous influence over how the brain behaves, especially at night. When glucose levels swing sharply, the brain interprets that instability as danger. It responds the same way it would to a threat, by activating stress systems, releasing alertness hormones, and pulling you out of rest. This is why people often wake in the middle of the night with a racing mind, a vague sense of unease, or the sudden urge to check the clock. It is not always anxiety in the psychological sense. Often it is chemistry. A drop in blood sugar triggers a biological alarm. The brain, dependent on glucose for energy, reacts as if fuel is running out. Cortisol rises. Adrenaline follows. The body prepares for action. From an evolutionary perspective, this response is brilliant. In a natural environment, a sudden drop in energy could mean starvation. The brain learned to treat it as an emergency. But in the modern world, this ancient mechanism is activated not by famine, but by what we ate a few hours earlier. Highly refined, fast-digesting foods create a spike and crash pattern. Blood sugar rises quickly, then falls just as fast. During the day, this manifests as energy slumps and cravings. At night, it becomes more disruptive. The crash often arrives in the deepest part of the sleep cycle, precisely when the brain is trying to enter its most restorative phases. Instead of sinking into repair, the nervous system is jolted into vigilance. The brain cannot distinguish between a metabolic dip and an external threat. It only knows that stability has been lost, so it interrupts sleep to restore control. This is why blood sugar stability is not just a metabolic issue, it is a cognitive one. It shapes the architecture of sleep, and sleep, in turn, shapes the quality of thought. When glucose remains steady through the night, the brain is freed from emergency management. It no longer has to divert resources toward survival. It can allocate energy to long-term projects, consolidating memory, integrating emotion, clearing waste, refining perception. The difference between these two states is subtle in the moment but profound over time. Fragmented sleep produces a mind that feels perpetually behind itself. You wake with a sense that something is unfinished. Focus becomes brittle. Emotions feel closer to the surface. You react faster than you reflect. Stable sleep, by contrast, creates continuity. The mind feels whole, thoughts connect more easily, emotional responses carry more space. You are not just rested, you are integrated. This is why the evening hours matter so much. They are the hinge between effort and repair. What you eat during this window determines whether the brain spends the night in construction or in crisis management. Food that digests slowly acts as a stabilizer. It releases energy in a gentle curve rather than a sharp peak. It keeps glucose within a narrow range. The brain does not need to intervene. There is no alarm, no emergency signal. Sleep deepens naturally. But the effect is not merely mechanical. There is a psychological resonance to this stability. A nervous system that is not repeatedly jolted during the night learns to trust rest. Over time, the mind stops bracing. It releases its grip more easily. The act of sleeping becomes less of a struggle and more of a return. Many people believe they have an anxious mind. In reality, they have a vigilant nervous system, and vigilance is often learned through repeated biological disruption. When the brain is trained to expect internal crises at night, it never fully stands down. Stability rewires that expectation. It teaches the brain that darkness does not mean danger, that stillness does not require defense, that letting go is safe. This is where physiology meets philosophy, because what the brain learns in the body becomes a worldview in the mind. A system that experiences continuity begins to perceive life as coherent. A system that experiences constant disruption begins to see chaos everywhere. The smallest internal rhythms shape the largest mental narratives. When blood sugar remains steady through the night, the brain experiences continuity. There is no abrupt break in energy, no sudden call to arms. Sleep flows rather than fractures, and from that continuity emerges a sense of internal trust. You wake not just with more energy, but with more coherence. Thoughts line up, emotions feel proportionate, decisions are less reactive because the mind is no longer operating from depletion. This is why so many people chase clarity with stimulation. They believe focus comes from force, but clarity is a byproduct of stability. It is what emerges when the brain is no longer managing emergencies. The modern mind is tired not because it works too much, but because it never fully rests. It is always on call, always half awake, always braced. Blood sugar stability is one of the quiet ways you tell the brain it can stand down. You are not just preventing a midnight awakening, you are teaching your nervous system a new story about the night. You are replacing vigilance with trust, and trust is the foundation of repair. Because a brain that feels safe does something remarkable, it stops protecting and starts rebuilding. And when that happens consistently, night after night, the mind you wake up with becomes sharper, steadier, and more your own. Clarity is not something you chase. It is something you allow. And the way you eat before sleep is one of the ways you say to your brain, there is nothing to fight. You can rest now. There is a deeper layer beneath all of this, one that moves beyond nutrients and sleep cycles and enters the realm of meaning. Because eating at night is never just biological. It is symbolic. It is a conversation between your conscious mind and your unconscious nervous system. Every choice you make in that quiet hour carries a message, and your brain is always listening. We tend to think of food as matter, calories, carbs, fats, but the brain experiences food as information. It asks, what does this mean about the world I live in? Is it frantic or steady, scarce or abundant, safe or unpredictable? The nervous system is constantly building a model of reality from these signals, and evening, more than any other time, is when those signals settle into belief. When you reach for something harsh, rushed, or overstimulating at night, the message is subtle but powerful. The day never really ends. You must stay alert. There is no true boundary between effort and rest. The brain absorbs that story, it carries it into sleep, it holds onto it during repair. Over time, that narrative becomes identity. You become someone who is always on, even in rest. But when you choose something gentle and grounding, you are saying something else entirely. The world can pause. I am allowed to stop. There is a rhythm here, and I am part of it. That message does not remain at the level of thought. It enters the nervous system. It becomes felt truth. This is why ritual matters, not in a mystical sense, but in a neurological one. Repeated behaviors create expectations. Expectations shape physiology. Physiology shapes perception, and perception shapes how you move through life. A calm evening choice becomes a form of self-communication. It tells your body that you are not abandoning it to chaos, that you are paying attention, that you are creating a boundary between what has been demanded of you and what you are allowed to become. Over time, this changes the relationship you have with your own mind. Instead of experiencing thoughts as something that happened to you, you begin to feel that you are in dialogue with them. You are not battling the nervous system, you are guiding it. The brain is not an enemy to be controlled. It is a living system seeking coherence. It wants patterns. It wants rhythm. It wants to know what comes next. When evenings become predictable in their gentleness, the brain begins to anticipate release. It starts winding down before you ask it to. The racing thoughts soften. The inner noise loses momentum. This is not discipline in the harsh sense. It is trust building. Think about what most people do. Oh, when the day ends. They collapse into distraction, endless scrolling, random snacking, bright screens, loud input. The message is fragmentation. There is no center. There is only escape. The brain remains scattered because the environment is scattered. But when you treat night as intentional space, something shifts. You are no longer running from the day, you are closing it. That closure has psychological weight. It creates emotional resolution. Unfinished conversations in the mind lose urgency. The nervous system learns that not everything must be solved immediately, that some things can wait, that some questions can rest. This is how resilience is built, not through constant engagement, but through learned release. A brain that never practices letting go cannot truly focus. It is always half elsewhere, always braced. But a brain that learns how to descend, night after night, into quiet restoration becomes capable of presence. It can give itself fully to a moment because it knows there will be an end. The evening ritual becomes a mirror of how you treat yourself. Do you push until collapse, or do you guide yourself gently into rest? Do you demand more, or do you create space? What you eat is part of that answer, because nourishment is never neutral. It either reinforces urgency or cultivates safety. It either extends the day or completes it. When you consistently choose calm at night, you begin to change your internal narrative. You stop seeing rest as weakness. You stop equating stillness with failure. You begin to understand that recovery is not the absence of progress. It is its foundation. This understanding ripples outward. It affects how you approach work, relationships, conflict, and uncertainty. You become less reactive because your system is no longer living in perpetual anticipation of threat. You become more reflective because your mind has space. The brain that feels safe at night becomes braver during the day. This is the paradox. Gentleness builds strength. Slowness creates clarity. Letting go sharpens perception. And it begins with something so small it almost feels insignificant. A choice made in quiet. A signal sent inward. You are not just eating. You are teaching your nervous system what kind of life it inhabits. So choose as if your mind is listening, because it is. And what it learns at night becomes who you are in the morning.